Philip Scora's fingers trembled as he applied pressure to the alien's wound, causing an unexpected shudder of pleasure to ripple through the Prilorian's body. This was not how he imagined first contact would go. The chaos of battle on Nexus Prime faded into the background, as Philip, a 28-year-old human soldier and combat medic, found himself in an impossible situation. Just hours ago, he'd been fighting for his life against the very species he was now trying to save. The Prilorian Empire had declared war on Earth, citing humanity's unchecked expansion and resource consumption as a threat to galactic stability. Now, separated from his unit and trapped behind enemy lines, Philip faced a moral dilemma that could alter the course of the war. The wounded Prilorian soldier, who identified himself as Sagan, lay before Philip in a mix of pain and confusion. His iridescent scales glistened with sweat, and his four eyes darted nervously between Philip's face and his own injury. The forest of Nexus Prime loomed around them, its alien flora providing cover from the ongoing conflict. Philip's mind raced as he worked. He knew treating an enemy combatant was controversial at best, treasonous at worst, but his medical training and human compassion overrode his military indoctrination. As he cleaned and dressed Sagan's wound, he noticed the Prilorian's reactions growing increasingly intense. Each touch seemed to send waves of pleasure through the alien's body, a physiological response that contradicted everything both species believed about each other. The revelation stunned both Philip and Sagan. Years of propaganda and misinformation crumbled in the face of this unexpected connection. As the sounds of distant explosions echoed through the alien forest, the two soldiers formed an uneasy alliance born of necessity and mutual fascination. As they prepared to move to safer ground, Philip learned that Sagan was no ordinary soldier. The Prilorian was a high-ranking officer with access to sensitive military information. The human's mind raced with the implications. If he could convince Sagan to defect, it could turn the tide of the war in humanity's favor. But as they began their journey across the harsh terrain of Nexus Prime, Philip found himself grappling with conflicting emotions. The growing attraction between him and Sagan challenged his loyalty to Earth and his military oath. Each step through the alien landscape brought new revelations about Prilorian culture and the true reasons behind the war, forcing Philip to question everything he thought he knew. Time was not on their side. Both human and Prilorian search parties scoured the planet, adding urgency to their already precarious situation. Philip knew that their choices in the coming days could reshape the future of human-Prilorian relations and potentially end the devastating conflict. As night fell on Nexus Prime, Philip gazed at the unfamiliar stars, the weight of his responsibility settling heavily on his shoulders. He had to navigate the complex terrain of interspecies attraction, military duty, and the potential for peace, all while trying to survive in hostile territory. The fate of two civilizations might rest in his hands, and it all started with a simple act of compassion that led to an unexpected pleasure. Little did Philip know that his journey with Sagan was about to challenge not just the future of the war, but the very foundations of human and Prilorian society. The path ahead was fraught with danger, discovery, and a deepening connection that neither species could have anticipated. As dawn broke over Nexus Prime, Philip and Sagan set out across the alien landscape. The terrain was treacherous, with jagged rock formations and dense, otherworldly vegetation that seemed to shift and writhe with each step. Philip's combat training kicked in as he navigated the hazards, while Sagan's knowledge of the planet's ecosystem proved invaluable. "Watch your step here," Sagan warned, pointing to a patch of luminescent moss. "It secretes a potent neurotoxin." Philip nodded, carefully skirting the area. As they walked, he couldn't help but marvel at how quickly their dynamic had shifted from enemies to allies. The unspoken tension between them crackled like static electricity, amplified by the alien world around them. Suddenly the sky darkened. Ominous clouds rolled in, bringing with them winds that howled like banshees. Lightning crackled across the horizon, illuminating the landscape in brief, terrifying flashes. "We need to find shelter," Philip shouted over the rising gale. Sagan's scales rippled in agitation as she scanned their surroundings. "There," she pointed to a narrow opening in a nearby cliff face. "A cave system. It should provide adequate protection." They sprinted towards the cave entrance, the storm nipping at their heels. Just as they dove inside, a bolt of lightning struck a tree behind them, sending splinters flying. The cave was tight, barely wide enough for them to stand side by side. As they caught their breath, Philip became acutely aware of Sagan's proximity. Her scales brushed against his arm, sending a visible shudder through her body. "Are you all right?" Philip asked, concerned. Sagan's 4 eyes blinked rapidly. "Yes, it's just, our physiology responds differently to touch. It's intense." As they ventured deeper into the cave to escape the howling winds, the passages narrowed further. They were forced to squeeze through tight spaces, each inadvertent contact between them causing Sagan to twitch and gasp. Finding a relatively open chamber, they decided to wait out the storm. The close quarters and shared danger created an atmosphere of intimacy. In the dim light filtering through the cave entrance, Philip studied Sagan's alien features, finding a strange beauty in her iridescent scales and multifaceted eyes. "Tell me about your home," Philip said, breaking the silence. Sagan's posture relaxed slightly. "I was born into the military caste. From my first moments, I was destined for war. Our society values order and duty above all else. But sometimes I wonder if there's more to life." Philip nodded, understanding. "On Earth, we have the freedom to choose our paths, but it comes with its own challenges. The uncertainty can be overwhelming." As they talked, Philip shared stories of his childhood in the sprawling megacities of Earth, while Sagan described the rigid hierarchy of Prylorian society. With each exchange, the barriers between them crumbled further. The storm raged for hours but eventually subsided. As they emerged from the cave, they found the landscape transformed. Uprooted alien trees and scattered debris created a maze-like obstacle course. Navigating the changed terrain, they stumbled upon an abandoned Prylorian outpost. The structure was partially buried by the storm, its sleek metallic surface marred by scratches and dents. "We might find supplies here," Sagan suggested, her military training evident in her tactical assessment. They entered the outpost cautiously. As they rummaged through the remains, Philip uncovered a cache of data crystals. Sagan's eyes widened in recognition. "Those are classified military documents," she said, her voice tight with conflict. Philip held the crystals, understanding the weight of the moment. "Sagan, think about what we've learned about each other, the connections we've made. Maybe this information could help end the war, bring our people together." Sagan's hands trembled as she reached for the crystals. Before she could decide, a harsh voice cut through the air. "Step away from those documents, traitor!" They spun to see a squad of Prylorian soldiers, led by an imposing figure with battle-scarred scales. Sagan stiffened, her voice barely a whisper. "Commander Vex." Vex's eyes narrowed, focusing on Philip. "Fraternizing with the enemy, Sagan? I expected better from you." He raised his weapon. "Execute the human. Prove your loyalty to the Empire." Time seemed to slow as Sagan looked between Vex and Philip. Her hand inched towards her sidearm, but instead of drawing it, she stepped in front of Philip. "No," she said, her voice firm. "This ends now." Vex's face contorted with rage. "Then you'll die with him!" Chaos erupted. Vex lunged at Sagan while his soldiers opened fire. Philip dove for cover, grabbing a fallen Prylorian weapon. He fired, incapacitating 2 soldiers as Sagan grappled with Vex. "Sagan, come on!" Philip shouted, clearing a path to the exit. They burst out of the outpost, sprinting into the alien wilderness. The sound of pursuit faded as they ran, not stopping until they reached a dense thicket of bioluminescent plants. As they caught their breath, the reality of their situation sank in. They were now fugitives, hunted by both sides of the conflict. Philip turned to Sagan, his eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper. "You saved my life. You've given up everything." Sagan's scales shimmered with a mix of fear and excitement. "Perhaps I've found something worth more than duty." As they stood there, fugitives in an alien world, the tension between them reached a breaking point. Their faces drew closer, the possibility of a new kind of first contact hanging in the air between them. In the distance, a strange structure loomed on the horizon, its architecture unlike anything human or Prylorian. Unknown to them, this ancient ruin held secrets that would challenge everything they thought they knew about their species and the war that divided them. Philip and Sagan emerged from the ancient ruins, their minds reeling from the revelations within. The alien architecture had hinted at a shared history between humans and Prylorians, challenging everything they thought they knew about their species' origins. As they stepped into the dense jungle, bioluminescent plants cast an ethereal glow across their path. Their moment of wonder was short-lived. A rustling in the undergrowth alerted them to approaching figures. Philip's heart raced as he recognized the familiar silhouettes of human combat armor. "Hold your fire!" a gruff voice called out. Captain Marcus Reed, Philip's former commanding officer, stepped into view. His weathered face lit up with a mixture of relief and confusion. "Skora? Is that really you?" Philip nodded, acutely aware of Sagan's presence beside him. "Captain Reed, I can explain." Reed's eyes narrowed as he finally registered the Prylorian standing next to his lost soldier. In an instant, his expression hardened. "Men, restrain the alien. Now!" "Wait!" Philip moved instinctively, placing himself between Sagan and the advancing soldiers. "She's not a threat. You don't understand what's happening here." Reed's face contorted with anger and disbelief. "Stand down, Skora. That's an order. Whatever this creature's done to your mind—" "She hasn't done anything to me," Philip interrupted, his voice steady despite the tension coursing through his body. "Captain, the war, it's all based on a lie." A tense silence fell over the group. Reed's men exchanged uncertain glances, their weapons still trained on Sagan. Philip took a deep breath and continued, "We found classified Prylorian documents. The war wasn't started by their entire empire. It was a small faction, acting against the wishes of their own people." Reed's eyes narrowed. "And you expect me to believe that, after everything they've done?" Philip reached into his pack, producing the data crystals they'd recovered from the Prylorian outpost. "See for yourself. This information could end the war, save countless lives on both sides." As Reed cautiously examined the crystals, Philip noticed the subtle shifts in the soldiers' postures. Doubt had begun to creep in, eroding their certainty. Seizing the moment, Philip pressed on. "Captain, these ruins we just came from, they suggest a shared history between our species. What if this war is based on a fundamental misunderstanding?" Reed looked up from the crystals, his expression unreadable. "What are you proposing, Skora?" "Peace talks," Philip said, the words hanging in the air like a challenge. "Using these ruins as neutral ground, we bring our leaders together, show them what we've discovered." A bark of laughter escaped Reed's lips. "Peace talks? With the same bastards who've been trying to wipe us out?" "It's our best chance to end this," Philip insisted. He glanced at Sagan, drawing strength from her presence. "We've seen what's possible when we set aside our differences." Reed's eyes darted between Philip and Sagan, a new suspicion dawning. "What exactly is going on between you two?" Before Philip could respond, a commotion erupted at the edge of the clearing. A Prylorian patrol burst through the foliage, weapons raised. At their head was a familiar face, Lieutenant Zara, Sagan's former second-in-command. "Lower your weapons, humans!" Zara shouted, her scales shimmering with aggression. In an instant, the jungle became a powder keg. Human and Prylorian soldiers faced each other, fingers twitching on triggers. Philip and Sagan exchanged a silent look, then moved as one. They stepped between the two groups, arms outstretched. "Stop!" Philip called out. "This ends now!" The sudden movement caused Sagan to brush against Philip. Her body shuddered visibly, scales rippling with pleasure. The reaction was impossible to miss. Confusion rippled through both groups. Zara's eyes widened in disbelief. "Sagan? What is this?" "It's proof," Sagan said, her voice steady despite the lingering tremors of pleasure. "Proof that our species are not meant to be enemies." Philip nodded, acutely aware of the eyes upon them. "We've discovered things that change everything, about the war, about our shared past." A tense silence fell over the clearing. Reed and Zara exchanged wary glances, neither willing to lower their weapons first. "We're proposing a ceasefire," Philip continued, "a chance to share what we've learned with both our leaders." Zara's eyes narrowed. And why should we trust you? Because the alternative is more bloodshed, Sagan replied. More lives lost in a war that never should have begun. The standoff stretched on, seconds feeling like hours. Finally, Reed lowered his weapon a fraction. I must be out of my mind, he muttered. Fine, we'll escort you to command. But one wrong move. He left the threat unspoken. As the mixed group began their cautious journey towards the human base, Philip and Sagan fell into step together. They spoke in hushed tones, piecing together a preliminary peace proposal that incorporated their discoveries and experiences. Their closeness did not go unnoticed. Human and Prylorian soldiers alike watched with a mixture of fascination and discomfort as the pair navigated the alien terrain, their movements in sync, their bond undeniable. Hours later, they arrived at the outskirts of the human command center. The massive structure loomed before them, a stark contrast to the lush jungle. General Alexandra Winters, Supreme Commander of Human Forces in the sector, strode out to meet them. Her piercing gaze took in the unlikely group before her. Captain Reed, she said, her voice clipped. I trust you have a good explanation for this unusual company. Reed saluted. Ma'am, we have a situation that requires your immediate attention. As Reed began his report, Philip felt a hand on his arm. A stern-faced officer gestured for him to follow. You're to be debriefed immediately, the officer said. Another group of soldiers surrounded Sagan, herding her towards a separate building. Philip's heart raced as he watched Sagan being led away. He knew that the next few hours would be crucial. The fate of two species hung in the balance, and it all rested on their ability to convince their leaders that peace was not only possible, but necessary. As he was escorted into the debriefing room, Philip steeled himself for the challenge ahead. The real test was just beginning. Beginning. As the door to the debriefing room closed behind him, Philip took a deep breath, steeling himself for the task ahead. Hours later, Philip emerged from the intense questioning session, his mind racing with the implications of what had transpired. General Alexandra Winters stood before him, her piercing gaze evaluating every nuance of his body language. Skora, she said, her voice low and controlled. Your story is unprecedented. If what you say is true, it could change everything. Philip nodded, his throat dry. General, I know it sounds impossible, but I've seen it with my own eyes. The evidence we've gathered could be fabricated, Winters interrupted. She paused, considering her next words carefully. And yet, the implications are too significant to ignore. A tense silence fell between them. Philip could almost see the gears turning in the general's mind, weighing the risks and potential rewards of his proposal. Finally, Winters spoke. I'm authorizing a covert mission. Your objective, make contact with moderate factions within the Prylorian government and propose peace talks. Philip's heart raced. This was the opportunity he'd been hoping for, but the magnitude of the task ahead was daunting. You'll have a stealth shuttle and a small team of our best operatives, Winters continued. Major Sarah Lewis will handle diplomatic protocols, and Sergeant Jack Rivera will provide combat support if needed. As if on cue, two figures approached. Major Lewis, a tall woman with sharp features and calculating eyes, nodded curtly at Philip. Beside her, Sergeant Rivera, a stocky man with a perpetual scowl, sized him up with a skeptical glance. Your mission begins in 1 hour, Winters said. I don't need to tell you what's at stake here, Skora. Don't let us down. The next hour passed in a blur of preparations. As Philip boarded the stealth shuttle, his mind drifted to Sagan. He hoped she was safe, unaware that their paths would soon cross again in a way neither of them could have anticipated. The shuttle slipped silently through the inky void of space, its stealth systems masking their approach to Prylorian-controlled territory. Philip sat in tense silence with his new teammates, each lost in their own thoughts about the monumental task ahead. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the shuttle. Prylorian patrol vessel detected, Major Lewis called out, her fingers flying over the control panel. Philip's heart raced. Detection this early could doom their entire mission. In a split-second decision, he made a choice that would alter the course of the war. Open a channel, he ordered. I want to hail them directly." Lewis and Rivera exchanged shocked glances. "Are you insane?" Rivera growled. "We'll be blasted out of the sky." "Trust me," Philip insisted, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. As Lewis reluctantly established the connection, Philip took a deep breath and spoke. "Prilorian vessel, this is Philip Scora of the Human Forces. I have urgent information regarding the war that must be shared with your highest-ranking officer immediately." Seconds ticked by like hours as they waited for a response. Finally, a gravelly voice crackled through the comm system. "Human vessel, this is Commander Krell. Your audacity is intriguing. I will grant you an audience. Proceed to these coordinates for a face-to-face meeting." As the connection closed, Philip let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. They had their foot in the door, but the real challenge was just beginning. The neutral space station loomed before them, a testament to the engineering prowess of both species. As their shuttle docked, Philip felt the weight of two civilizations on his shoulders. Commander Krell cut an imposing figure as he strode into the meeting room, his scales a deep crimson that spoke of countless battles. His eyes, sharp and calculating, fixed on Philip. "Speak quickly, human," Krell rumbled. "My patience is not infinite." Philip launched into his explanation, presenting the evidence of the war's true origins and the potential for peace. As he spoke, he could see a spark of intrigue in Krell's eyes, buried beneath layers of skepticism. "Your words are compelling," Krell admitted grudgingly. "But how can we trust that this is not some elaborate human deception?" Philip's mind raced. He needed something concrete, something undeniable. Then an idea struck him. Bold, potentially dangerous, but with the power to change everything. "Commander," Philip said, his voice steady, "I'd like to demonstrate something. With your permission, I'd like to shake your hand." Krell's eyes narrowed, but curiosity won out. He extended his hand and Philip grasped it firmly. The reaction was immediate and unmistakable. Krell's scales rippled with pleasure, a visible shudder passing through his body. Gasps echoed from the Prilorian crew members present. As they broke contact, Krell stared at his hand in wonder. "By the eternal flame," he whispered. The legends were true. The atmosphere in the room had shifted palpably. Krell's skepticism had given way to a cautious hope. "This changes things," he said slowly. "I will arrange a meeting with Archon Zix, leader of our moderate faction. But be warned, the journey to his stronghold will be perilous. Supreme Commander Vex controls much of the space between here and there, and he will not take kindly to this mission." As Philip and his team prepared for the next leg of their journey, a transmission crackled through their comms. Philip's heart leapt as he recognized Sagan's voice. "Philip, if you're receiving this, listen carefully. I've escaped the research facility. Vex is planning something terrible, a bioweapon that could destroy any chance of peace. You must reach Archon Zix before it's too late." The urgency in her voice sent a chill down Philip's spine. Their mission had just become a race against time, with the fate of both species hanging in the balance. Commander Krell, hearing the transmission, made a swift decision. "Take my ship," he said, gesturing to a sleek Prilorian vessel docked nearby. "It will give you a better chance of passing through our territory undetected." As they boarded the Prilorian ship, they were joined by an unexpected ally, Lieutenant Zara, Sagan's former second-in-command. "I will guide you through our space," she said, her eyes glinting with drive. "The future of both our peoples depends on this mission's success." With a new sense of urgency, the unlikely crew set course for Archon Zix's stronghold. As the stars streaked past the view screen, Philip knew that the most dangerous part of their journey was just beginning. The path ahead was fraught with peril, but the promise of peace and the memory of Sagan's touch drove him forward into the unknown. The stars blurred into streaks of light as the Prilorian ship accelerated through space. Philip stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the navigation display. Lieutenant Zara's presence beside him was a constant reminder of the unlikely alliance they had forged. "We're approaching Archon Zix's territory," Zara announced, her scales shifting from deep blue to a muted green. "Prepare for—" Her words were cut short by a violent shudder that rocked the ship. Red warning lights flooded the bridge. Multiple energy signatures detected, Major Lewis called out, her fingers flying over the control panel. It's a full-scale battle. Through the view screen, Philip watched in horror as the space before them erupted into chaos. Prylorian ships, distinguished by their organic, flowing designs, exchanged fire with angular vessels bearing the insignia of Supreme Commander Vex. "We're caught in the crossfire," Sergeant Rivera growled, his hands tightening on his weapon. Philip's mind raced. They couldn't turn back, not when they were so close. An idea formed, born of desperation and the unique capabilities of their vessel. "Zara," he said, turning to the Prylorian officer, "this ship, it's a hybrid of our technologies, right?" She nodded, her eyes narrowing. "Yes, but—" "Then we might have a chance," Philip interrupted. "If we can combine the human stealth systems with Prylorian cloaking technology, we might just slip through undetected." The team worked feverishly, jury-rigging systems and rerouting power. As the battle raged around them, their ships seemed to fade from view, becoming little more than a ghost. For a breathless moment, it seemed to work. They glided silently through the chaos, untouched by the destruction around them. Then, without warning, a stray energy blast clipped their starboard engine. Alarms blared as the ship spiraled out of control, plummeting towards the planet's surface. Philip gripped the controls, fighting against the G-forces as they entered the atmosphere. "Brace for impact," he shouted. The world outside became a blur of fire and smoke. With a bone-jarring crash, the ship plowed into the alien landscape, carving a deep furrow before finally coming to rest. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of ruptured systems and the groan of stressed metal. Philip blinked, tasting blood in his mouth. Around him, his team stirred, assessing injuries and damage. "Everyone alive?" he called out. A chorus of pained affirmatives answered him. As they emerged from the wreckage, the true nature of their predicament became clear. The crash had left them stranded in a vast alien wilderness, with Archon Zix's stronghold a distant silhouette on the horizon. "We have no choice," Philip said, his voice grim. "We continue on foot." The journey that followed tested them in ways none could have anticipated. The planet's ecosystem seemed designed to challenge their every step. Massive creatures, their bodies pulsing with bioluminescent patterns, stalked the edges of clearings. Vegetation writhed and reached for them with thorny tendrils. It was during one heart-stopping encounter with a heat-seeking predator that their unlikely alliance proved its worth. The creature, a mass of muscle and razor-sharp appendages, had them cornered in a rocky outcropping. "It's tracking our body heat," Zara hissed, her own temperature regulation kicking in to cool her scales. Philip's mind raced, recalling survival training and Prylorian biology lessons. "Rivera Lewis, use your thermal blankets. Zara, we need you to act as bait." Understanding dawned in their eyes. As Zara stepped forward, her body temperature rising to create a tempting target, the humans wrapped themselves in the heat-reflecting material. The creature lunged and found itself grasping at empty air as Zara nimbly sidestepped its attack. Confused by the sudden disappearance of its prey, the predator retreated, leaving the team to catch their breath and marvel at their success. As they neared their destination, Philip's communicator crackled to life. Sagan's voice, strained but determined, filled him with equal parts relief and dread. "Philip, we've uncovered Vex's plan. He's weaponizing the pleasure response. You must hurry. The effects could be catastrophic." The news spurred them on, even as exhaustion threatened to overwhelm them. Finally, cresting a ridge, they saw their goal, Archon Zix's stronghold. But the sight that greeted them was far from encouraging. Vex's forces had surrounded the compound, their weapons trained on the defenders. And there, being deployed in the field, were canisters Philip recognized all too well from Sagan's description. The bioweapon was already in play. "We're too late," Rivera muttered, his face grim. But Philip's mind was already working, fueled by desperation and the shared knowledge of two species. "No," he said, his eyes lighting up with purpose. "We can stop this. Sagan and I theorized there might be a way to disrupt the enhanced pleasure response." As the team huddled together, formulating a plan that would utilize their unique strengths and knowledge, Philip's communicator chimed once more. General Winter's voice cut through the air, her tone urgent. Skora, listen carefully. Things are changing back home. We have a chance for peace talks, but only if you can get Archon Zix to the negotiating table in the next 24 hours. Whatever you're planning, make it count. Philip looked at his team, then at the besieged stronghold before them. The next few hours would determine the fate of two species. With a nod to his companions, he began to outline their daring assault. "All right," he said, his voice low and intense. "Here's what we're going to do." As Philip finished outlining their plan, a series of explosions rocked the compound. The team instinctively took cover, but Philip's communicator crackled to life with an unexpected voice. "Philip, do you read me? This is Sagan. We've arrived in orbit and are providing cover fire. Get to the extraction point immediately." Relief and adrenaline surged through Philip's veins. "Copy that, Sagan. We're on our way." He turned to his team and Archon Zix. "Change of plans. We've got an extraction team inbound. Let's move." They burst into action, navigating the crumbling corridors of the stronghold. Lieutenant Zara took point, her scales shifting colors as she analyzed potential threats. "Vex's forces are concentrated on the eastern wing," she reported. "We should cut through the central atrium to avoid the bulk of their troops." As they rounded a corner, a section of ceiling collapsed, nearly crushing Sergeant Rivera. Philip yanked him back just in time, debris raining down where he had stood moments before. "Thanks, Skora," Rivera panted. "I owe you one." They pressed on, the sounds of battle growing louder. Major Lewis provided cover fire as they crossed exposed areas, her advanced human weaponry making short work of any Prylorian soldiers who crossed their path. Archon Zix, despite his injuries, kept pace with the group. "We're nearing the extraction point," he wheezed. "But something's wrong. The orbital bombardment has stopped." As if on cue, a massive shadow fell over them. Through a gaping hole in the stronghold's roof, they saw a colossal machine descending from the sky. Its segmented body bristled with weapons, a fusion of Prylorian biotech and human engineering. "By the eternal flame," Zara gasped. "It's Vex's war machine. He's piloting it himself." The war machine landed with a thunderous impact, cutting off their escape route, its weapon systems whirred to life, targeting the group. Philip's mind raced. "We need to disable that thing, fast. Zix, any ideas?" The Archon's eyes lit up. "There's an experimental EMP device in the lower labs. It might be powerful enough to short-circuit Vex's monstrosity." "Rivera, you're with me," Philip decided quickly. "The rest of you, hold this position and keep Vex distracted. We'll get that EMP." Without waiting for a response, Philip and Rivera sprinted back into the depths of the stronghold. They navigated a maze of corridors, dodging falling debris and pockets of Vex's soldiers. Rivera's combat training proved invaluable as they fought their way through, his precise shots clearing a path. They reached the lab, finding it in disarray. "There!" Rivera pointed to a device pulsing with eerie blue light. "That has to be it." As Philip grabbed the EMP, his communicator crackled. "Philip, we can't hold out much longer." Lewis's voice was strained, punctuated by the sound of weapons fire. "Vex is tearing through our defenses." "We're on our way back," Philip responded, already running. "Hold on." They retraced their steps, the urgency of their mission driving them forward. As they neared the extraction point, the full scale of the battle became apparent. Vex's war machine dominated the skyline, its weapons leaving trails of destruction. Philip activated the EMP device, its hum building to a crescendo. "Everyone, brace yourselves," he shouted. A wave of energy pulsed outward, washing over the battlefield. The war machine's lights flickered and died, its massive form becoming still. For a moment, an eerie silence fell over the area. "Now's our chance," Sagan's voice came through the comm. "Get to the landing pad." They sprinted across the open ground, Zix supported between Philip and Rivera. A shuttle descended through the smoke-filled sky, touching down just as they reached the pad. The team scrambled aboard, Sagan at the controls. "Hang on," she warned as the shuttle rocketed upward. "This ride's about to get bumpy." As they broke atmosphere, the extent of the space battle became clear. Sagan's coalition forces engaged Vex's fleet in a dazzling display of coordinated attacks. Human and Prylorian ships moved in perfect sync, their combined tactics catching Vex's forces off guard. "We're broadcasting this across both networks," Sagan explained as she piloted. "The public needs to see what we can accomplish together." Their moment of triumph was short-lived. A massive battlecruiser broke away from the main fight, bearing down on their shuttle. "It's Vex," Zara confirmed, her scales paling. "He must have a backup command ship." The chase that followed pushed both ship and crew to their limits. Sagan's piloting skills were put to the test as she weaved through debris fields and energy barrages. Philip manned the weapon systems, his movements perfectly in sync with Sagan's maneuvers. A lucky shot from Vex's ship grazed their hull, causing a rapid depressurization. Warning klaxons blared as the team scrambled to seal the breach. "Philip, I need you on damage control," Sagan called out. "I can't shake him." Without a word, Philip moved to assist. As they worked to reroute power and patch the hull, their movements flowed together with an almost supernatural harmony. The rest of the crew watched in awe as human and Prylorian worked as one, their deep connection transcending species barriers. With the breach sealed and systems stabilized, they approached the rendezvous coordinates for the peace talks. Vex, however, wasn't about to let them escape. A swarm of missiles streaked toward their ship, threatening to end their mission mere moments from success. "I have an idea," Philip said, his eyes meeting Sagan's. "It's risky, but it might be our only shot." He outlined his plan to use their experimental FTL drive to create a localized wormhole, redirecting the missiles back at Vex. The crew held their breath as Sagan engaged the drive, reality warping around them. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed as if the plan had failed. Then, with a brilliant flash, the missiles vanished, only to reappear heading straight for Vex's ship. The resulting explosion lit up space, leaving the battlecruiser crippled and adrift. As they docked with the neutral station, a palpable sense of hope filled the air. Representatives from both species gathered to witness this historic moment. Archon Zix, supported by Philip and Sagan, stepped forward to meet with General Winters and the human delegation. Just as the talks were about to begin, an urgent message came through. Philip's blood ran cold as he listened to the report of a devastating attack on a Prylorian colony by human extremists. The room erupted into chaos, years of mistrust threatening to undo everything they had accomplished. Philip looked at Sagan, then at the assembled leaders of both species. He knew that the real challenge was only just beginning. With tensions at a breaking point and the specter of renewed conflict looming, they would need every ounce of diplomacy, courage, and understanding to salvage the peace process and prevent the war from spiraling into unthinkable new territory. Philip's heart raced as he surveyed the chaotic scene unfolding before him. The news of the attack on the Prylorian colony had shattered the tentative peace like a hammer through glass. Angry voices filled the room, accusations flying back and forth between human and Prylorian representatives. "This is an act of war," a Prylorian diplomat shouted, his scales flashing crimson with rage. General Winters, her face ashen, struggled to maintain order. "Please, we need to approach this rationally. We don't have all the facts yet." "Facts?" Archon Zix interrupted, his voice strained. "The fact is that a human attack has decimated one of our colonies while we sit here discussing peace." Philip caught Sagan's eye across the room. In that moment of shared understanding, they both knew they had to act fast to salvage the situation. Stepping forward, Philip raised his voice above the din. "I propose a joint human-Prylorian task force to investigate this attack." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to him. "We need to work together now more than ever," Philip continued. "A combined team can uncover the truth and bring the perpetrators to justice, regardless of their species." Archon Zix's eyes narrowed, considering the proposal. After a tense moment, he nodded. "Agreed. This will be a test of our ability to cooperate." General Winters, seeing an opportunity to regain control, quickly authorized the mission. Within hours, Philip and Sagan found themselves leading a diverse team towards the attacked Prylorian colony. As their ship descended through the planet's atmosphere, the extent of the devastation became clear. Smoke rose from the ruins of once gleaming structures, and the air was thick with the acrid smell of destruction. "By the stars," Sagan whispered, her normally composed demeanor shaken. The team spread out, searching for clues amidst the wreckage. Philip knelt beside a twisted piece of metal, his brow furrowed in concentration. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered. Sagan approached, her antennae twitching with curiosity. "What is it?" Philip held up the fragment. "This is from a human stealth ship, top-secret tech. How did the attackers get their hands on this?" Their eyes met, a shared realization dawning. This was no ordinary extremist group. They had access to classified military hardware. As they delved deeper into their investigation, a pattern began to emerge. Clues pointed to a shadowy organization known as the Purity Front, a group composed of both human and Prylorian extremists. "They're playing both sides," Sagan concluded as they pored over the evidence. "Prolonging the war serves their interests somehow." Their pursuit of the Purity Front led them across multiple planets, each step bringing them closer to the truth. Along the way, Philip and Sagan's bond deepened, their complementary skills creating a formidable team. On a desolate moon, they narrowly escaped an ambush by Purity Front sympathizers. As they caught their breath in the safety of their ship, Philip turned to Sagan. "I couldn't have made it this far without you," he said softly. Sagan's antennae quivered, a gesture Philip had come to recognize as her equivalent of a smile. "Nor I without you, Philip." Their next lead brought them to a remote asteroid field. Hidden among the rocky debris was a space station, the Purity Front's headquarters. "We need to get inside," Philip said, studying the station's defenses. "If we can gather concrete evidence of their plans, we might just save the peace process." Sagan nodded, her expression determined. "I can bypass their security systems, but we'll need a distraction." As they finalized their infiltration plan, Philip couldn't shake a feeling of unease. Something about this mission felt different, more dangerous than anything they'd faced before. They made their way onto the station, moving silently through dimly lit corridors. In the control room, they discovered plans for more attacks, each designed to reignite the war between humans and Prylorians. Suddenly, alarms blared. They'd been discovered. "We need to move now!" Philip shouted, grabbing the data drive containing the evidence. As they raced towards their extraction point, a familiar figure stepped out of the shadows, blocking their path. "Commander Vex!" Sagan gasped. The Prylorian commander, whom they thought defeated, stood before them, his eyes gleaming with malice. "Did you really think you could stop us?" Vex sneered. "The Purity Front will ensure this war never ends." Philip's mind raced, assessing their options. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and time was running out. But as he glanced at Sagan, he knew they had one advantage their enemies could never match: their unbreakable bond forged through shared adversity. With a subtle nod to Sagan, Philip prepared to face this new threat. The fate of two species hung in the balance, and failure was not an option. Philip's mind raced as he faced Commander Vex, acutely aware of the ticking clock. The fate of two species hung in the balance, and failure was not an option. Suddenly, his communicator vibrated with an urgent message. Keeping his eyes on Vex, Philip slowly reached for the device. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Vex sneered, raising his weapon. In that split second of distraction, Sagan moved. Her Prylorian reflexes, honed by months of combat, allowed her to close the distance between them in a blur. She struck Vex's arm, sending his weapon clattering to the floor. As Vex stumbled back, Philip seized the opportunity to check the message. His eyes widened as he decrypted its contents. "Sagan, we need to move, now!" he shouted, dodging a wild swing from Vex. They sprinted down the corridor, leaving the disarmed Prylorian commander behind. As they ran, Philip briefed Sagan on the message's contents. "The Purity Front has planted a reality-altering device on the Peace Talk station," he explained between breaths. "If we don't stop it, it'll manipulate both humans and Prylorians into hating each other again." Sagan's antennae twitched in alarm. "How much time do we have?" "Hours at most," Philip replied grimly. They reached their ship, quickly prepping for launch. As they broke away from the Purity Front's asteroid base, Philip opened a secure channel to General Winters and Archon Zix. The holographic projections of both leaders appeared, their faces etched with concern. "We've uncovered a critical threat," Philip reported, outlining the situation. General Winter's expression hardened. "We can't postpone the talks. The political situation is too fragile." "Agreed," Archon Zix nodded. "We must proceed as planned to avoid arousing suspicion." "Then we'll handle this covertly," Philip suggested. "We can use the peace talks as cover while we search for the device." The leaders concurred, and a plan quickly took shape. As their ship approached the station, Philip assembled a small team of trusted operatives from both species. Upon docking, they were met by a delegation of human and Prylorian officials. The corridors buzzed with activity as final preparations for the historic meeting were underway. Philip pulled General Winters aside for a quick briefing. "We'll proceed with the search immediately. Can you buy us some time?" The general nodded. "I'll draw out the opening ceremonies, but be quick, we can't stall forever." As the peace talks began in the main chamber, Philip's team dispersed throughout the station. Sagan took point, her Prylorian senses attuned to any unusual energy signatures. "This way," she whispered, leading them down a maintenance shaft. "I'm detecting some kind of quantum fluctuation." They emerged into a dimly lit corridor, their footsteps echoing ominously. Suddenly, a group of armed figures rounded the corner ahead. "Purity Front operatives," Philip hissed, recognizing their insignia. The corridor erupted in a firefight. Philip's team took cover behind bulkheads, exchanging fire with the extremists. In the chaos, a stray shot grazed Philip's arm, causing him to drop his weapon. Sagan reacted instantly. She vaulted over their cover, using her Prylorian agility to close the distance. Philip watched in amazement as she effortlessly disarmed two operatives, her movements a fluid blend of Prylorian martial arts and human combat techniques. With the threat neutralized, Sagan returned to Philip's side, concern evident in her eyes. "You're injured." Philip winced as he examined the wound. "I'll live, but you'll need to take point from here." They pressed on, following Sagan's senses deeper into the station's core. Meanwhile, in the peace talk chamber, General Winters and Archon Zix began their negotiations. The proceedings were broadcast live across both empires, billions of viewers tuning in to witness this historic moment. As they neared the central power core, Sagan's antenna quivered. "The energy signature is strongest here." They entered the core, a cavernous chamber dominated by pulsing energy conduits. In the center stood a device unlike anything they'd seen before, a swirling vortex of light and shadow. "That's it," Philip breathed, "the reality-altering device." As they approached, they realized the true complexity of their task. The device was ingeniously designed, requiring simultaneous input from both a human and a Prylorian to deactivate. Philip and Sagan exchanged a look of understanding. They would have to work in perfect synchronization to shut it down. As they began the deactivation sequence, the device triggered a defense mechanism. A strange, shimmering gas began to fill the chamber. Philip felt an overwhelming wave of pleasure wash over him, threatening to cloud his mind. "It's a psychoactive agent," Sagan gasped, her scales flushing with color. "It's amplifying the pleasure response between our species." Fighting against the intense sensations, they struggled to maintain focus on their task. Their hands trembled as they worked the controls, each touch sending waves of ecstasy through their bodies. In a moment of clarity, Philip realized the solution. "Sagan, our connection, we can use it." Understanding dawned in her eyes. They embraced their bond, channeling the amplified pleasure response to enhance their coordination rather than hinder it. Their movements became a dance of perfect synchronization. Human ingenuity meshed seamlessly with Prylorian precision as they worked to deactivate the device. Time seemed to slow as they moved as one, their combined efforts creating a harmony that transcended species. With a final, synchronized motion, they deactivated the reality-altering device. The swirling vortex collapsed in on itself, leaving behind only a smoking husk. Exhausted but triumphant, Philip and Sagan leaned on each other for support as they made their way out of the power core. As they emerged, they were met with cheers from both human and Prylorian crew members, who had witnessed their incredible teamwork through the station's security feeds. The news of their success spread quickly, reaching the peace talk chamber just as negotiations had reached a critical juncture. General Winters and Archon Zix seized upon this powerful symbol of human Prylorian cooperation, using it to galvanize support for a lasting peace agreement. As Philip and Sagan watched from a viewing gallery, the two leaders signed a historic treaty, officially ending the war and establishing a framework for future collaboration between their species. In the aftermath of these events, Philip found himself standing beside Sagan on a balcony overlooking the station's main concourse. Below them, humans and Prylorians mingled freely, the barriers between them beginning to crumble. "You know," Philip said softly, "when I first treated your wounds on Nexus Prime, I never imagined we'd end up here." Sagan's antennae quivered in what Philip now recognized as a smile. Perhaps it was inevitable. After all, our species were always meant to come together. We just needed the right push. As they looked out at the sea of faces below, both human and Prylorian, Philip and Sagan knew that their journey was nowhere near the end. The future held endless possibilities for exploration, understanding, and growth between their once warring species. They joined hands, their touch still eliciting that familiar pleasure response, but now tempered with deep mutual respect and understanding. Together, they stepped forward, ready to face whatever challenges the new era of interstellar cooperation might bring.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.